Commence primary ignition.
I'm just not the hero type, clearly.
What a piece of junk.
Enterprise, this is the captain.
I got a bad feeling about this.
It's all part of the plan.
Engage.
Welcome back to Podcast 2 for 1. I'm your host, Donovan Thompson, with my co-host,
Daniel Wingfield.
And if you're on the YouTube, you can see that Dr. Bruce Hutchinson has joined us yet again.
Glad to be
Hooray.
back.
And we're glad to have you back, Bruce. Today we are talking Baby Driver by Edgar Wright. I think last time we had you on, Bruce, we talked about Raising Arizona, and that film kind of spurred the conversation of Edgar Wright's inspirations, and we kind of started talking about Baby Driver, and that's kind of where we are now. But yeah, so I'm excited to talk about it. I've only seen it twice now, so that's kind of low on my end. But if you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button, that notification bell. That way you're up to date on all future episodes of Podcast 2 for 1, as well as all the cool content we have at 2 for 1 Studios. And if you didn't know, we are sponsored by Kapow Comics, located on 4047 East Kill Avenue in Sherwood, Arkansas. There they have comic books, collectibles, graphic novels, and of course, special guest appearances throughout the year. All right, guys. Kapow. I don't even think they know they sponsor us. I mean, that was like a thing that happened. But I'm glad to say it every time.
You gave them some like flyer, like some little like glossy little things. I tried. What if they're all still there, like every single one of them, just sitting there?
No,
like,
they're not. I went in there and looked.
Okay.
I went in. Well, maybe they're behind a desk. Yeah, but
Wait. So to be clear, you have a sponsor that hasn't given you any money. Is that?
No, it was.
Bruce,
well, we were going to promote
talk
our
about
stuff. This. Listen, when you're at this level,
we can talk about it after. We can save it.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah. A little behind the scenes look for the audience. It's great.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, we're talking Baby Driver today. Real quick, before we kind of dive into more of the plot kind of things, what's your general impressions here, guys? Bruce, we'll start with you. You love it? You hate it?
Well, I want to say one thing first, which is that Edgar Wright's new movie Last Night in Soho is coming out in a few weeks.
Yes.
And and I think timing some of these choices with like new movies by directors and analyzing one of their older ones might kind of be a cool thing to do. But
yeah, definitely.
But yeah, the first time I saw Baby Driver, I had really mixed feelings about it. This time around, I liked it better. I think the main thing that was a bit of a struggle for me the first time around is that the movie starts off, and this is actually something my wife mentioned to me or felt when we watched it, but it starts off pretty light. I mean, there's an initial bank robbery, but so much of the early parts of the movie are kind of motivated by Baby's happiness and, sort of this wonderful choreography where when he's happy, he kind of dances around his house and his apartment, and he's always sort of, lip syncing to music he's listening to and all that kind of stuff. And then, later in the movie, like the movie just gets increasingly more violent, and so at first it's just Jamie Foxx's character Bats, sort of killing people for no real good reason, which begins to annoy Baby Driver. And then by the last act, we just have horrible acts of violence, people's heads exploding and stuff like that. And that was a little hard for me the first time around, but maybe because I was used to it, or maybe because just the second time it seemed to make more sense to me. I don't know. It didn't bother me as much. And so, of course, there's just so much great, editing and sound work. And, I think in particular, stylistically, it's super fun. I think from a narrative character point of view, I think like Scott Pilgrim, is maybe a better movie from Edgar Wright, but just pure visuals. It's very enjoyable. I mean, it's just a lot of fun.
Sure. Daniel?
Yeah, so the first time I saw this movie was in LA. I believe it was at the Egyptian Theater. And first time being in LA, it was one of the first movies I saw while I was out there. And it was, a summertime movie release. And I was very taken with it. I thought it was just, and I still do, I think it's kind of a perfect summer movie, like a summer action film that also has a bit more heart in it, I guess, than maybe your typical action films at times. Or I guess maybe it's your summer action flick from your typically not action flick director, a quasi-indie director. at least stylistically. But yeah, so I was I think I saw it under very romantic circumstances as like a filmmaker, and I really, really loved it. And I think I remember hearing some feedback where like people were having more mixed feelings, and I was like, oh, okay, interesting. I didn't have those, but rewatching it, I still think like you mentioned, Bruce, that the editing, the way that it's paced to music so constantly. There was a couple times where I was like, that was a really, like we just switched songs with a cut basically and just started a new musical kind of sequence or scene. And it felt a little abrupt to me, or a little bit like we're jumping around for the song's sake rather than like the movie's sake, almost a little bit. But I still loved it. I think there were times I felt a little less engaged with it. Honestly, kind of the middle section between like when we've met Baby and they go on like their I guess the bats heist, and then kind of until the first bats heist, until kind of the finale and the kind of final stretch of the film, there's a little bit of a lull for me. But overall, I still really liked it. I still think it's a great summer flick. If you're just wanting to watch something that's fun, with fun car chases and really good stuff to music, and just a fun kind of adventurous story. Not very realistic, but it's kind of just it's got heart to it. It's fun. It's adventurous. It's kind of whimsical, even amongst the blood. But yeah, no, I still really liked it.
Yeah, I mean, when I first saw it in theaters, I remember enjoying it, but not like just being enamored with it like I have previous Edgar Wright movies. Like, I'm a huge fan of Hot Fuzz, for obvious reasons, and I love Scott Pilgrim. It's like a masterpiece. I think it's just an amazing movie on all levels. And of course, Shaun of the Dead, and I even enjoy At World's End in some parts too, or maybe The World's End. I can't remember the name of the movie. But I remember rewatching this one and just not being as not in love with it, just not even liking it as much as I did. I don't think it's a bad movie. I think stylistically it's fantastic. I think the editing is amazing. I think the car scenes themselves. I remember my dad used to tell me all the time when there were certain movies like Fast and the Furious or whatever would come out. My dad goes, "Oh, those aren't car movies." Like he would definitely like had a specific type of car driving he preferred in his movies that kind of harkened back to like Bullet and Smokey and the Bandit. And this movie, rewatching this, I'm like, Dad would have loved the car stuff in this movie. So for a car enthusiast, I can really see people appealing to that. I think the supporting cast is great. It's always a bummer to me to see Kevin Spacey in a movie because I love him as an actor. And then I'm just like, immediately I'm bummed out that like I won't get any more movies with him because of who he is. And like some of my favorite stuff of all time, he's in, like LA Confidential and some other things, and Seven, of course. So it really, really bums me out, but it's still, I still enjoy the movie. But it's just not like as great as some of the other Edgar Wright stuff. And I think it's because it's kind of missing some of the really cheeky kind of stuff, like I think kind of like Shaun of the Dead has and Hot Fuzz and those kind of humor, it's way more toned back, but it also has, this great soundtrack to it. And there's some really impressive stuff here happening with like the editing. Katie, she'd never seen it. We were just watching it again. I was like my third time a second ago. And there was a scene in there, just to kind of get off track, where it's after he throws away the gloves. It's in slow motion, but in slower motion, and that still matches up with the song that's happening. So they must have had like either played it faster for him to sing to, because it's really clever, and something I haven't really seen before.
Sorry, go ahead. You guys probably know these tidbits, but these are some of my favorite tidbits. In fact, I used this film in teaching intro to film to talk about editing to a beat or editing to music and like tempo in editing. Just because it's like the most on the nose version of that. It's literally like a music video movie. But sure. So something very interesting. For one, Edgar Wright said he wrote every song that's in the movie is in the script that he originally wrote, which is typically like a 101 no-no in script writing, because like, well, unless you're Edgar Wright, you're probably not going to get the rights to any of that music. If you are, it's going to be one of them or something. So it's just typically like not wise to integrate such specific music into plot and into character. But he did, and he got all the rights, and that's awesome. But in terms of editing, though, they actually edited this film on site as they shot it. So there's a really cool, I saw it on Reddit, someone posted it. They have it framed in someone's house. It may be Edgar Wright's house. It's one of those like multicolored Avid looking keyboards with like the shortcuts and all that kind of stuff. And it's framed, and it's like this keyboard edited the entire Baby Driver movie, because they had like a cart with the editor and his rig and everything on there. And like as soon as they would get done shooting, they would give it to him, and he would cut it and make sure on set that it matched the tempo of the music. And so they had to make, because the music was so integral to it, they had to make sure it worked before they left set, because they might have to reshoot something or something. So that is pretty. I've never heard of that happening before like that on a movie set, at least not to that degree. So yeah, just some pretty interesting facts that this movie did have some outside of the typical norms in terms of how they made it.
No,
yeah,
that's
that's
cool.
really interesting. Yeah, they must have had a really good script supervisor too.
Yeah.
And there is some longer, well, in a few cases, there's longer takes too, so they can kind of get away with that a little bit, more. So they really kind of sync all that kind of stuff up. But yeah, no, I mean, that's pretty much it. I enjoy the movie. I think it's fun. It's just not my favorite of his. I think we'll probably all agree on that. But I think there is some interesting things happening here story-wise. Even like repeat acts, almost repeat sequences, and then it's interesting. So let's kind of dive into it a little bit more. So, again, we kind of discussed earlier, this won't be as long, so we don't have to go on for every single beat here. But I think we can hit a pretty good little thing here. So yeah, we start off, the opening of the movie is a great car sequence, and we're getting introduced to Baby and getting introduced to John Hamm's character and some others, and which I love seeing him in a role that's not Mad Men anytime, because I feel like he needs to act more. Not even act more. You need to keep working. I'd just like to see him in more things, I should say. So they're in the car, right? Yeah, go for it. No, go for it.
Well, I was going to throw out there that this is just another tidbit. I know a lot of tidbits in this movie, more than other movies, for it not to be like...
Yeah, I'm impressed.
The opening sequence, like the car thing, that actually is based on a commercial Edgar Wright made in 2009 for Mint Royale. But it's that basically the exact same sequence almost, but it's a car commercial. And it's what I think, talking to a buddy of mine that's like a super Edgar Wright fan, was saying that his understanding was that was like what he used to help pitch the movie, even was that commercial, be like, look this, I made this commercial, and like that's kind of how he used it. But yeah, there's I pulled it up on YouTube. It's like, obviously it's not exactly the same, but it is very close to the same. So yeah, it's interesting. You can look it up there.
That's cool. What's it called again? Sorry, Mint Royale?
Blue Song, Mint Royale, directed by... No, it's actually maybe from 2003. It's maybe earlier than I was even thinking.
Wow.
It was uploaded in 2009.
Gotcha. Go on, Bruce.
I was just going to say, it's one other thing with this is it's almost impossible not to compare the opening sequence of Baby Driver to the opening sequence of Drive.
Sure.
Because both movies start with, getaway drivers. And of course, they're completely different stylistically. I mean, from every point, from the music to this one's during the day, Drive is at night. But it is interesting, if you kind of played them side by side to sort of see how two similar scenes can also, through their differences, really set the tone for what the movie's going to be. And both scenes do that job really well. I mean, Drive's opening scene sets this cool nighttime neon vibey kind of movie, and this
Miami Vice. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And Baby Driver sets very much the, this very fast paced, certain kind of music, more of this late 60s, early to mid 70s, kind of classic rock style, I guess. I mean, it's not quite classic rock, but there's sort of a mix of different. But yeah, I mean, it's a nice comparison.
No, yeah, I mean, Drive, I've only seen it one time in theaters, and I own it, and I've it's one of those ones like every year I'm like, oh, I got to rewatch that, but I haven't in a long time. I want his jacket in Drive.
Yeah.
I think like everybody does.
Sexy
I think.
it's a sexy
Yeah.
jacket. Yeah.
Maybe I just want to be Ryan Gosling. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. I don't want the jacket. I want to look like him in the jacket.
Speaking of jackets, though, Baby's jacket is pretty interesting because it basically recreates the Han Solo look.
Right.
Yes.
With because it's a jacket with a black body and white sleeves, but it ends up looking like, a long sleeve white shirt with a black vest.
Yeah.
No,
I'm
interesting.
sure that was purposeful.
100%. No, I definitely felt like they're doing these, space cowboy kind of references to the Han Solo. I did think it was a little unrealistic that like he saw himself like on the TV with security camera with him in that jacket, and he wore it in every heist after that. But that's
Right.
fine. I know it's a movie. It's fine.
Yeah, I mean, and again, we don't have to dive into this too deeply, but like the movie opens up and they're robbing a bank, and essentially we learn that Baby is in debt to Kevin Spacey's character, and he's got one more job, and after this said job, then he can basically, go on his way, or at least the impression is that he could possibly go on his way, and then through there we kind of learn Baby's life. We find out a girl that he likes, and then it kind of starts going south from there.
Yep.
Did you guys, was it kind of weird? I mean, not weird, but I guess they had to set up the movie with this first heist to kind of set the not the tone, but like the editing and just kind of like I say vibe, but the vibe kind of changes during the movie. But we have another sequence kind of like right after that. At least, I'm not being exactly correct here, but we have the next big moment is this second heist, right? With Jamie Foxx's character now pushing him. So it's like these back-to-back, almost identical kind of plot beats for the most part. We are getting more information, and we're kind of seeing more of how Baby operates within those moments. Is that kind of weird for you guys to kind of have these two things back to back? Like you could take off the first one, and you don't really need it.
Yeah, I mean, I totally get what you're saying. It does end up creating a bit of repetition. When you look at it like that first act, I think really is kind of three sequences, and you just identified them perfectly. You've got like the first about 13 minutes is the first heist, and then sort of the aftermath of that heist, and sort of ending with Baby and Doc discussing the money. And then we just get like 7 minutes or so of Baby's life, and that's where we get these great, that really well-known sort of one take flowing thing where actually that's in the first one. I actually take that back. That's in the first 13 minutes where he goes to get coffee, and he's super happy, and we get this one take, wonderful choreographed thing, and then they leave. But then, we just get 6 or 7 minutes of him with Joseph, and then he meets Debbie at the diner, and then next thing you know, he's gotten a phone call saying, okay, it's time, we're back in. And then you're right, it is different, of course, because it goes a bit wrong, and we have the whole thing with the guy chasing them in the pickup truck, and it's a much longer thing, but overall, you're right, there is a bit of repetition there. I don't know if it's a bad thing or not, but
I don't think it's a bad thing or anything, but I mean, there is a lot of merit there in having, obviously you have a mission that goes correct, and then you have a mission that goes wrong because you're setting up the expectation that it could go correct, right? And it doesn't. So I do see that benefit. I mean, I think it's overall pretty cool. One thing I think is kind of weird in these two moments, or I guess these first couple sequences, is like everyone's picking on Baby. Like, what's the beef with Baby? You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, it's so weird.
Yeah, I mean, I think to me it makes it just giving him conflict to deal with, basically, that also lets other characters kind of explain more things about them. Now, I definitely agree. I think like the first three sequences, and like I feel like the middle sequence almost feels like a musical at times because of how set. Like even when he gets, after the coffee meeting, when they get back to with Joe, which CJ Jones, I actually got to meet CJ Jones at the Fayetteville Film Festival in 2017. Super awesome dude. Was really great. I've got a picture on my Facebook, but don't be a stalker and go try to find it. So yeah, I definitely feel this like musical sense to everything. And then like I think I honestly feel like I liked the bats and the Baby conflict, because I felt like he just gave him someone to bounce off of. Because other than that, everyone's like singing his praises, basically. Like obviously Doc loves him, and then Buddy, is it Buddy and Darling? Yeah. Buddy and Darling are kind of chill. They're just kind of super chill, at least, which is interesting when you parallel like what the how the movie ends up by the end of it. But yeah, no, I like the Bats stuff. I like the pulling his earbud off, listening to what he's listening to, and I think honestly to some degree, you need this to really flesh out, because Baby as a protagonist is pretty darn silent too. This movie, he does not talk a lot or have a lot of dialogue, and if he does, it's like quick and to the point, not expounding. He's kind of I feel like he's this kind of like doesn't talk about his emotions very much character, kind of a little closed off. Even with Deborah, I feel like he gives her one word answers a lot. But you needed something to like poke at him, and even like he doesn't even defend himself. Really, he just lets Doc kind of take up for him in that scene with Bats a bit. But I liked it. I think the Bats. I like Jamie Foxx in this movie a lot. I think he works really well as his character, and him and Baby have a good dynamic, even though it's kind of Jamie Foxx carrying most of that dynamic. But yeah.
I think there's, to me, there's two things going on with that. One of them is there's sort of this setup that Joe really sets up, and that's sort of stressed a couple of times in the movie, which is that Baby does not belong in this world, right? I mean, for one, his name is Baby, but two, there's sort of this idea of setting him up as an innocent person who is stuck in this world that he shouldn't be in, right? And so I think part of that is showing these criminals, especially Bats, and then Griff, John Bernthal's character, where they're really picking on him, and they're more of these gruff criminal types who just push people's buttons because they're jerks, and that's just part of their personality. And so I think one of the things going on with that is to try to build that up, and of course that's going to play a big part in the ending, because Baby is going to go to prison, but we've got to believe that he's not going to go to prison for very long, and that the judge will do that. And so part of this is setting up that idea, right, that he doesn't really belong here, and he's been trying to get out, but if he tried, he'd probably get killed, and those kind of things. But I also think it raises another point, and this is one of the probably my biggest criticism, I think, of the movie is pretty, kind of getting into the academic speak. Generally when we're looking at even Hollywood movies, we have characters who have an external goal that's very strongly drives the plot of the movie. And then we usually have an internal goal that revolves around some sort of internal change or conflict that the character has, and they generally have to overcome that either in order to get the external goal, or the external goal sort of allows that to happen. And Baby doesn't have that. I mean, Baby really is a one-dimensional, externally oriented character. The movie tries to give him some traditional things that are normally associated with an internal goal, like the death of his mother and a romance, but he doesn't ever change. I mean, normally what happens is a character goes through some sort of experience and changes at the end, but Baby is always Baby. He's sort of, it's funny, he's dressed as Han Solo. He is kind of a little bit of that Harrison Ford character who, he's already solid from the start. He doesn't react to being picked on or anything, and he stays that way all the way through the movie. And I'm not sure that this kind of movie can carry that. I mean, Indiana Jones, James Bond, they're so much bigger that we can deal with a character who doesn't really show any development or growth. But I'm not sure that quite works with Baby. I would have liked to have seen a little bit more change or growth in that character over the course of the movie. And we point to Scott Pilgrim, as an example of a character who does have to grow and change, and accepts people for who they are, and, things of that nature. So, yeah.
I'll say the one place you might be able to argue, just in him not choosing to continue playing along, especially like when he refuses to drive away, when he kills Bats. That is definitely like revolving around the the external goal of completing jobs or doing this one last job or whatever. Yeah. But I agree. I think it's if it's there, it's so flimsy to be there. And I think honestly, I think they could have done something. What could have really tied that in was because like I thought it was really interesting how he had this backstory of like an abusive father and this kind of really talented mother, and that ends up like them fighting ends up killing them. And like I feel like they could have done something there to like extra motivate him, like okay, he's gonna stand up for people that are being picked on, or the innocent people that are being abused by people or something. And I think that was definitely like kind of a missed opportunity, because I think it's almost there with everything of the elements you've got in. You just, if he had found a way to kind of, I mean, at surface level, you have him flash back in the car before he impales, Jamie Foxx, some kind of like memory of like him wanting to fight against his dad, but he didn't, or something to kind of tie that into like his emotional origin. But yeah, I agree. It was definitely, I mean, it's kind of non-existent.
No, I agree. I agree as well. I think that is kind of one of my bigger problems with the movie, if I have any big problems with it at all. 100%. I was thinking a similar thing, especially with like, his internal goal with the mom and X, Y, and Z. He has the cassette tape with the mom and all this kind of stuff that kind of carries throughout the film. And it doesn't really seem like it has a huge payoff, other than these plot points are resolved and like the situation he's in is resolved. That's what the thing for me is. It doesn't feel like I'm actually going anywhere with these characters, or particularly with Baby. I feel like the waitress has more of an arc than he does, and it's not even super prevalent there either, other than she chooses to not have this life that I feel like that's more of a bigger choice than him, because he's already making pretty bold choices by being a bank robber. So him picking up one day and leaving is not super out of the ordinary. For her, it seems more out of ordinary for her to just pick up and leave, even though she states it's what she wants to do. But yeah.
Well, and also I think they kind of give his whole origin story like in dialogue. Don't show it, like him jacking cars as a kid. I mean, I think that could have been interesting to even have a scene of, or something like building up, and even something like that could have just felt like we get a more gradual sense of how he got here, which could have been used to kind of pay off a big decision later, how he's choosing to leave this situation. And we can get to this like at the end, but I even think his relationship with Doc is super uneven, and I'll say like Doc's decision at the end makes no sense to me from him as a character. You know what I mean? So it kind of even like if Baby was going to like turn against someone, Doc would have been the person to eventually do that with, like make that final decision with, and then it's completely opposite to what you might think happened there. So yeah, no, I agree.
I'll just point out before we move on, Donovan, you mentioned Debbie and her sort of growth or choice. But, even with Debbie and Baby, like she accepts everything about him 100%, no questions asked, comes in with a bunch of criminals. She just rolls with it. I mean, it's kind of cool in a way. Like, I actually enjoy that a little bit. Like,
ride or die.
He comes in and she she gets it. She understands what's happening. And there's something clever about that. At the same time, even after, like maybe after it's all over, she could have been like, what the hell's wrong with you? But she never does. It's just all perfect. Their relationship is perfect. Yeah.
Or her reaction to like the police brigade at the end. You know what I mean? It's like, she's
just right on it. Yeah, I'm gonna.
She's like screech.
Right. Yeah.
It's like, are you a good driver now too? Do you expect to get away from this? I'll also say one thing that I noticed, it was just in continuity, I think. So when he meets Debbie, she's all like, "Yeah, I'm about to quit this job." Right? She's like, I'm quitting. This guy sucks. And they kind of make this reference to this boss being like abusive, maybe, or just like a dick. I don't know. Like it kind of feels like how they set it up. He's like, oh yeah, this guy's like a bad guy. And then you like never see him do anything than like yell at his employees, which is like, okay, yeah, he's a dick, but I don't know if he's like scary or something. But then he's like, okay, at the end of that scene when they like go to the laundromat, right? He's like, all right, let's just get out. You want to get out of here? Let's get out of here. Like, and assuming like the last thing she said was she's quitting.
I was a little confused by that too. Yeah.
They get to the laundromat and he's like, well, let's go now. She's like, oh, I work a double tomorrow.
Yeah.
double all week.
Did you just quit? Yeah, all week. I worked doubles all week. And I was like, at the job, you quit? Or
yeah, there is a very strong implication that when she says get out of here, she means like leave the job permanently, but clearly it's just like for the day. Yeah.
Like, are you leaving early, or is like your shift ending and you're just pretending like it's some big deal that you're leaving at the end of your shift? I'm confused. Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
No, it's fine. Yeah, I mean, we can kind of start getting more into, kind of one of the next big kind of things here is when they basically go into we're skipping over a lot of little things, which I do think the movie is clever in kind of foreshadowing. I think it's clever in tying little comments or cute little dialogue back together. I do give it credit in there. Yeah, I mean, there's some good little moments in there like that made me chuckle. I'm like, oh, that's pretty clever. Even like Kevin Spacey doing the chalkboard. He's like, and I just did this whole thing.
Right.
Like that makes me laugh. Like there's little things like that I really enjoy. But I think plot wise, the next big thing happens is now that he's out of, or at least supposedly out of, the gig here, he ends up going and throws away the vehicle, and now he's free from Doc, and essentially, he kind of starts living his life, right? Like he's with the waitress, which is kind of what we're picking back off what you said, Daniel. And of course, they go to the same place that John Hamm and Buddy and whoever, can't think of her name, they say when they're in the elevator and they're talking about a fancy restaurant, he picks up on that because that's probably the only thing he knows about fancy restaurants, and so it's where they go. And of course, runs in the dock again, and we get the not so surprising revelation that he's not done. Like you've only just started, sort of thing, and that kind of kicks off our next big heist, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Although I think maybe to point to what I think is maybe one of the other flaws of the movie, and Daniel, as much as you're a fan, you kind of identified it because you said, the movie lost me a little bit in the middle, but you then basically said from the end of the robbery with bats until the final robbery, which is the entirety of Act 2, which is about 45 minutes in the middle of the movie. And that 45 minutes does kind of drift a little bit, and it's not really clear, because we sort of have, as Donovan set it up, we have sort of like this first sequence of 10 or 15 minutes where he's trying to live life, without being a robber. Doesn't last very long, and then of course, we just, he gets sort of caught up at the restaurant, and Doc makes very clear that, he's still in the game, he can't leave. And then we get, and again, there's a lot of individual fun stuff. We get this, so then the next sequence is like preparing for the robbery, and they're like casing the post office. We meet Doc's nephew, who is hilarious.
Right.
With all of his scoping out of everything and casing the joint. And then we have them getting the guns, picking up the guns. But then we have, then after they pick up the guns, then we have this weird thing where it sort of suddenly becomes about protecting Debbie because they go to the diner, and so we have this coincidence of the diner, and then he tells her he's going to leave at 2 a.m. and he tries to leave, but he can't. And all of it just doesn't quite go together. It just feels like it needs something a little stronger, because it's just sort of jumping too much for me. It's sort of like, okay, he's trying to live his life. Oh, now he's prepping for this robbery. Oh, now Debbie's in danger from, and he's going to try to leave, but now he can't. And so it all feels like, honestly, like it's killing time until the final act, where we're going to have one more robbery, right? And normally this is where we might do a little bit more of the character work with Baby, but other than him trying to protect Debbie, there's just there's not a lot there, and we don't get any. We do get one. We get the sort of the action sequence with the guns. But we go a much longer stretch with not much action. So it just all ends up for me feeling a little uneven in that middle section.
I agree. I think, honestly, when he tries to leave at 2 a.m. and he gets caught, that's kind of where I get locked. It locks back in a bit for me, or at least the cause and effect seems to be just kind of domino after that.
Right. And then that launches the third act. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I kind of have issue with that too, is that I mean, Doc is they're accusing him of being an informant, right? And because there's recording stuff, I'm like, okay, so you know that he's a pizza delivery driver, but then you've been working with him for a very long time and you don't know he's an informant, and you also have like, well, I guess he finds out he has dirty cops on his payroll, or something like that, right? But so I mean,
we learned
like,
that after the
right, but he seems like he's very well in the know. But for this, he's going to kind of, I don't know. It seems it's kind of weird.
Yeah, and he's never informed. That's the thing. He's never informed, right? Otherwise, he would have been taken down already. So, I mean,
I also feel like. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Fine. Okay. I was gonna say, I did feel a little bit like that wasn't Doc actually like. Maybe I'm just totally reading into this, but to me, it almost felt like because he says we're not doing it, like it's Baby's call, right? After that moment, after he's like, well, what are we gonna do? It's Baby's call, and Baby's one's like, no, we're fucking doing this. Partly because Jamie Foxx like threatened to kill him subtly just a minute ago. It's like, hey, I'll drop him off. But two, I almost felt like Doc was like maybe testing Baby a little bit, or trying to like gauge like, is he even like almost gauge his loyalty a little bit in that moment. And I personally, like, at least once he heard the tape, I don't feel like Doc was like actually seriously concerned. I'm sure when they show up with a bunch of tapes with like words on, he's like, oh, what the fuck? But like, it didn't seem to me like he was seriously, concerned at that point. Maybe I'm just reading into it. I think partly it's because of that Doc uneven character. Like, I feel like he's just all over the place a bit in motivation and like how he follows through with that. But yeah, I do think, to me, that scene was more about Bats and Buddy, or Baby, sorry. Bats and Baby, and like that kind of conflict coming to like a not to a head, like a pre-head before it really comes to a head, like, in the next sequence.
Pre-head.
But yeah.
For the record,
and
it works.
Yeah.
Oh, I was gonna say, for the record, if I was Kevin Spacey, like, I also would be concerned if these were tapes, even if he had mixed over them. Like, I'm like, I don't want even fragments of my conversation around, period. So I get that. I do get that.
Yeah. Which, and to be fair, he was going to keep all the tapes.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. And it is it does create a funny moment, because when they discover that the tapes really are these, and by the way, not so great recordings. I mean, which I did like he's not also some amazing DJ guy, mixer. They're okay. They're just kind of fun little things. But at that point, Doc's just like, oh, come on. Like, you made us go through all this stuff, and it was exactly what Baby said it was, so he's kind of annoyed. Yes. It is interesting though, because it's actually before that when Doc puts the decision in Baby's hands, and Baby says, because so they have the gun thing, and so they're going to maybe call off the robbery because of the cops potentially crawling all over everything. Baby makes the call to do the robbery, but he makes the call to do the robbery, but he's not planning on doing it, right? He says, we're doing it, and he's all tough about it, then he's just going to leave at 2 a.m., right? And then Buddy and Bats follow him outside, and that's when they find the recording, and then they sort of go back in and they get the stuff, and then they come back and it turns out it's all fine. And that's basically the end of the act. And then we see Debbie, sort of being stood up a little bit, and it's 2 a.m. at the diner.
Yeah, and this is kind of I'm just, as we're talking about, I'm thinking about it more. This is, obviously the whole point of him even recording these, and the whole point of all that stuff is to create this conflict between the characters, right? And sure, it's a fun, quirky little thing. He's involved with music, X, Y, and Z, but it really doesn't, the whole thing, him recording stuff, even him getting caught, and that whole transaction doesn't really inform me much about his character. It's just like things happening.
That's a great point. And one of the things with conflict, when you have a script with conflict, a big part of, conflict is meant to keep things interesting and not boring, right? We don't have conflict. Sometimes things feel boring. But more than that, conflict is about reaction, right? It's about what does the character do in response to the conflict, and then we learn about the character. So a great example of that is when Baby kills bats, right? I mean, he's just gotten to the point where he can't handle it anymore. Is just like, and I think he understands that he's not going to get out of this world unless he takes more extreme action. But in that moment, you see him make a choice, and he punches it forward and kills bats. And that's a moment that tells you something about Baby, right? It's a conflict that creates a reaction. But Baby has no reaction to the conflict of the tapes, right? I mean, he just sits there and all this stuff happens, and we waste 3 minutes of the movie just for the sort of a little bit of the joke of, oh, they're actually those tapes, and then the plot device of he's got to go back in order to get his mom tape, right? I mean, that's what that whole thing does. But you're 100% right. It doesn't reveal anything about Baby, and Baby does nothing other than sit there, which he does a lot with conflict. And I think that's part of the problem is because he's sort of this stoic, silent character. I mean, he can be silent and still react to things, but, because he's silent, that makes it more challenging. But he rarely reacts to conflicts in a way that reveal anything about him. He does some, like with bats, but I think that's part of why he feels like a bit of a one-dimensional character.
Right.
Totally agree.
Yeah, I mean, we can kind of
we're to the final heist again. We talked about the cassettes, and then him trying to after he sneaks out, and then we're finally at the. I guess this would be the beginning, or kind of the. I'm trying to think about it. I haven't broken up an acts in my head yet, so I'm like, is this beginning? I guess the last stretch. I mean, if we're talking 4 acts or 3 acts. But I
just love. Sorry, the last stretch.
I'm just saying nothing. I haven't even said anything. I'm saying words that mean nothing, that accumulate no substance.
I know.
I will say that this, at its length, I think it fits pretty clearly into 3 acts. The middle act is a little long at closer to 45 minutes, and then you got like 35-minute first act, 45-minute middle act, like 30-minute last act. And then those are roughly broken into sequences. I would say that there's kind of like 3 sequences in each act that kind of give us mini goals within the act. So yeah, I mean, I think pretty clearly we wake up, it's the next morning, right? After the no-show of Baby at 2 a.m. We see Debbie in the diner, and then we kind of do this this dissolve and into the next morning, and now we're launching into Act 3 and all the events of the final day.
Yeah, and then it just seems like a kind of just roller coaster. I mean, obviously we get there with the heist. They're killing people kind of left and right. He kind of has that moment where he's telling the lady no, and then but it all kind of feels like. Not filler, but it just kind of we're just getting to the point where he ends up ramming the car, kind of thing, and then just that feels like when the act really kind of kicks off for me. Like when he rams the car, when he kills bats, and then when obviously then he just starts running, and then we have a very long chase sequence. You could kind of count the rest of the movie as being at some point in a chase sequence. But yeah.
Well, I just figured out kind of another problem I have with the movie is that I don't know who the antagonist is. Like it feels like the antagonist is just the job itself, like the nature of the world he operates in. Because one thing I do find interesting is it's a plot point. The fact that he rotates crews, right? So the first heist we have John Hamm and his girl and John Barenthal. Next heist we have Jamie Foxx and those other 2 duds. And then in this third and final, or at least in this final act, it's we're combining teams now, right? We've met these people throughout the thing, and it seems like John Hamm is really, really nice and kind of likes Baby throughout the movie until obviously the tape stuff starts kind of happening. But it seems like Jamie Foxx is the antagonist besides Doc. But then at the end here, after Jamie Foxx dies, then Doc kind of starts helping out Baby, and then John Hamm, Buddy, starts kind of being the antagonist all of a sudden. It's just this weird like rotation of people being the main threat, and it's kind of hard for me to, I don't know, there's something about having a thorough line villain throughout the whole thing that you can latch onto, like even thematically. Like once I defeat this villain, I'm defeating whatever internal thing I have, right? So, but I guess you could say that again, like I mentioned earlier, it's the villain is the job and the people within the job, I guess.
Well, and his goal overall for the movie is to get out, right? To get out of sort of this criminal world. So in a way, all of the criminals become part of that antagonistical force. But you're right in the sense that clearly that setup is Doc, right? I mean, Doc is the guy who is keeping him in this world. And because the crews are rotated until the final heist, he's never met anyone more than twice. So he's got no reason to worry about any of them. He only has to worry about Doc. So it does, I think there's this, I think what's happening is this attempt to sort of to surprise us, right? By Doc suddenly being a softie, and then Buddy, who seems to have been the main defender of Baby, suddenly becomes the big antagonist in the last, sequence or so. But it does feel forced, it happens so fast. And Doc just, Doc just says, I was married once, or I was in love once.
Yeah. Randomly.
And that's it. Like, just,
I know.
I mean, purely like, oh, okay, we got to justify this. I was married once. Okay.
Yeah.
So, or I was, so if I'm helping you. Yeah.
yeah. It's like you're telling me that you would have killed everyone I love if I had not done another job with you. But now that I've fucked everything up on purpose, you're willing to give me money and sacrifice your life for me to get out of here.
Right.
What?
Yeah, it's pretty weird.
We need the backstory on Doc's,
exactly
version that happened behind the scenes here. But I do think you're right, Donovan, that it is the world, and I think it's Baby versus the criminal world that he shouldn't be a part of, whatever. And I agree, it's super flimsy. The only time I think it actually works is when they're at Bo's, when it's Buddy and Darling and all of them at Bo's Diner, and they're having that moment where Bats is like sizing them up. That was great, and I think that really highlighted let's size up how these people got to this world, and kind of seeing Baby there, just kind of realizing how different he is from these people. That moment, and I think that's probably one of the better just kind of dialogue scenes of the film. It works really well, but you're right, it does not flesh out. It does kind of feel like a half-baked idea in that way.
I also have to say, in that moment, he fights going to the diner. Bats gets pissed off. They go to the diner. They're leaving the diner. Bats pulls his gun as if he's going to kill Debbie. Baby stops him by grabbing his gun. Baby should be dead, right? I mean, let's be honest. There's no way that Bats he's already pissed off when they have the whole moment where, at the end of Act 1, where he turned the wheel and
didn't let him kill that guy,
knocked his gun up, and Bats calls him on that. But he grabs Bats' gun. I just don't see that you do that, right? You don't grab Bats' gun. There's just a lot of these little moments that they feel more motivated by getting the plot to certain places than by what the characters would actually do, sort of okay, we got to have Doc help them out so we can have a fun little plot twist, but it doesn't really feel motivated by, the character and anything we've known about the character up until that point.
Yeah, especially when he's threatening to kill Deborah. It is really weird. It's really weird. We kind of go into.
Sorry, go ahead. Go for it. No, I was going to say it did feel a little bit like that. Bats was also just going to kill Deborah for being slightly short with them. Like other times he's killing people to trying to kill them or in the heist, and in this moment it's she disrespected me, so for plot reasons I'm going to go and act like I'm going to kill her. So
well, I will say though that he kills the guy at the convenience store when they stop for food and gum for the implication is that he's killed that guy. So I do think we've got sort of this setup that's an MO of his, but still the whole moment doesn't quite work, I think.
And it's all just, I guess, there's that one part of like the real world side of my brain, but it's like no good criminal would just go around killing people in different places where there's like security footage, or like it's like, oh yeah, there's this guy in this very, flamboyantly red jacket.
Right.
You know what I mean? And he's just killing people all over the city. We should put out like a bulletin or something.
Yeah, no, so I mean that's pretty much almost wrapping it up, right? We get into the final climactic thing after Doc's choice. He kills Buddy, and then Baby and Deborah go off, and Baby's arrested, right? And he's sentenced to 25 years, and he gets out, I think, in 5 on good behavior.
Well, we got to at least mention the final the car battle of.
Well, even before that, we've skipped. Sure. I do think one important thing, which is going and rescuing Joe. After he finally escapes all the police and sort of gets out of the bank robbery situation, he goes back to rescue Joe, who was beat up when they got the tapes. Also, by the way, not quite sure why Joe is still alive. Again, from the plot perspective, we need it, but from everything we know about Bats and these other characters, how he's not dead, is a little bit of a mystery. But he goes back and he saves him, and he drops him off at a retirement home.
Also, can we just bring it up that like Bats just took his wheelchair to like scare him? Like he took Joe's wheelchair with him, and like he wheels in there. It's like, he's okay. Like, is he in the? Did you bring him, or did you just take the chair? Like, wasn't that awkward to get in the car? Those things aren't like easy to put in there. Like, let's get all these tapes and
I assume he's doing that to sort of scare Baby, but again, it more was just, oh, hey, cool. Wouldn't it be cool if Bats is wheeling around in the wheelchair, right? And like, sure, let's get the wheelchair. I mean, it's just a prop. It's over, one stage over. So go grab it,
And I will say too, like the moment, I definitely feel like there's a lot of moments in this film that feel plot serviced, not like world and like character motivated. Like when he steals the the purple car, and he hands the lady back her purse and says sorry. Like the only reason that's in there is for the end.
Yeah.
Like there's no other reason I can see to have that scene other than to have her like testifying at the end to like get him, an easier sentence. And that just feels a little bit like, okay, like we know he's a good guy, and like I guess or just kind of finding more witnesses to confirm that or something. I was less annoyed with like the lady. He like didn't let her go in the bank robbery because he was trying to save her, but that felt like in context real. This feels like we just need a scene that makes him more likable and less bad or something to the public.
In fact, he gives. Oh, sorry, I was just going to say he also gives a woman her baby, right? When they're but that woman is right, but that woman is not at the trial, if I'm remembering correctly.
I think so. I don't remember.
That she should have been there, right? I mean, but Anyway, Donovan, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say I'm reading. Granted, it's been a little bit since I watched the whole movie. I watched it pretty close after we first discussed it. Then I watched part of it today. But in this description here, it says Deborah stays in contact with Baby during his incarceration and greets him outside the prison gates on the day of his release in a vintage car, just like in a dream he had. I don't remember him dreaming about this. Does he?
Yes, he does. He has a moment right, I think, before he says that they're going to do the robbery. There's sort of this black and white fantasy that's similar to his
all
flashbacks.
50s, those 50s clothing.
Right, but they're wearing 50s clothes, and it's all innocent, and I guess she's sort of similar. She's standing next to the car and everything. Yeah.
Isn't it? Well, that's my Raising Arizona connection then, is that he's having a dream, and then it's coming to fruition at the end. So there you go.
Yeah. Although I do wonder sort of at the end, assuming that we take the ending literally, I do wonder what happened to Joe, because they don't go get Joe from the nursing home to bring him with them.
Yeah.
Does that mean that Joe has died over the last 5 years? You know?
Oh man.
He's pretty old. He's pretty old.
Yeah, I mean, he is old, you know. He's deaf and he can't speak, you know. So I don't know. It does put I don't know. It's just sort of weird.
Well,
I wish there was some.
It makes Joe feel like, again, kind of like a sob story almost, to just make Baby more like, why is he handicapped? Why is he deaf? You know what I mean? Like, what is the...
Yeah, there's certain ironies, right? I mean, there's the irony that his apartment is filled with records, and that, you know, that Baby always dances to records, but of course, Baby is also losing his hearing. Maybe, you know, so there's a parallel with Joe on that level. I actually thought there'd be more of a sense, you know, at the end. I guess it's Buddy shoots, you know, both sides of on either side of his ears. I thought he would kind of lose his hearing more permanently, but they don't really play that up. And then he would sort of become like Joe. So yeah, I mean, there are some nice ironies with all the music and the sense of how important sound is. But I think you're right. In the end, it just feels almost, I hate to say this, but like when you give a character a dog to make him likable, right? I mean, it's like, let's give him a deaf, unable to speak, African-American, old guy, right? I mean, it almost feels, in a wheelchair.
And he's your stepfather. I also wanted to say, it was like, he's like, this guy took care of him when he was a child. Like, I'm surely the wheelchair is new then. Like, if he was raising this kid from like 8 years old or whenever the accident happened.
But it also raises the question, well, is his deafness new? You know, I mean, because he does have all the records, or is he just really love to, you know, put his hand on the speaker? You know, again, it's just, we've created a character to serve a function, and he just doesn't have the depth. Not that we need tons of backstory, but it just, you know, sometimes it just feels a little bit cheap. Sorry to all the Baby Driver fans, but yeah.
No, you're right. It does. And I mean, what's weird about this movie is that we're sitting here, we're probably tearing it apart more than we're praising it, but like it's got so many great elements to it, like the music choices, the cinematography, the editing, the performances are pretty good, you know?
Well, and I think we should transition to that, because, you know, the way we normally do this is to sort of run through the narrative. And unfortunately, with this particular movie, I think it's the narrative that's weak, right? I think the characters are a little one-dimensional. The narrative's kind of weak from what we would expect from an Edgar Wright movie. You know, we could compare this to a John Wick movie, you know, and we'd be all over it, even though John Wick's really no more in-depth than Baby is, and we wouldn't be complaining, and we'd be focusing more on the action. But I think
Bruce, I told you last time when you come on this podcast not to be back-talking things I love. I told you last time. John Wick is a fully formed,
but you know, that's what I'm saying, is that, you know, is we love John Wick. I mean, I love John Wick. I think it's a great action movie. And the fact that character doesn't have a lot of depth doesn't bother us, right? I mean, that is not something we would criticize about that movie, because I think we go, that's not what that movie's for, right? But it feels like this movie is more a movie that's supposed to have more well-developed characters, and is what we expect from Edgar Wright. And I think that's why we've spent so much time kind of, you know, criticizing it. But we can, I think, and we should, in these last few minutes, however long we take, kind of come back to it from that almost like John Wick perspective of talking about it technically, because on that level, it is a lot of fun, for sure.
Well, you know,
I feel like... Sorry, go ahead, Donna.
Well, I was going to say, I do feel like even just kind of retroactively thinking about his other movies, you know, I mean, obviously Scott Pilgrim, he does go through a change, you know, but like maybe Hot Fuzz and some of these others, I kind of feel like some of these characters are kind of set in their ways from the whole beginning, from beginning to end. And they don't really feel like they're making huge jumps in character change. And it's more about the style and the type of humor and the delivery of the entertainment, and not so much about the substance so much.
But in Hot Fuzz, doesn't he go from, you know, hating this assignment in the small town to loving his place in the community?
He does.
You know,
you're right. You're right.
But,
You're right.
I'm not saying that's some super in-depth growth, but I think we want something like that for that kind of movie.
Right.
And honestly, I feel like there's a different, like, the amount of humor that those movies are in genre is it's a much more comedy and action. This feels like this is an action movie with some comedy at times, and I wouldn't call it a comedy. Yeah. Right. Mm-hmm. And I feel like even with comedy, the genre, you get a little more freedom to take things less seriously. Even like character development, you can be a little lighter with it, not to spend too much time with it, and use it for humor's sake, but also to progress the plot. I think with Baby Driver, the thing is, and we're gonna get to the praising part, I promise. I think with Baby Driver it's like I think it's almost pretending to have more heart, or trying to give the appearance of more character development or deeper characters, or a more, like those kinds of things. And then and again, when you just watch it, again, you go to a movie theater, get a bucket of popcorn, and you watch the film, and it's like, wow, that was a blast. You know what I mean? It really is a blast to watch, especially I think your first time seeing everything, because there's a lot of good surprises and little twists. But it is the kind of movie that, by nature of what we're doing it, when you sit on it and you think about it and you start kind of following the ideas through to their fruition, it starts to kind of fall apart. And that's fine. I think that's fine. But I think, like, even with how you're comparing it to John Wick, is I feel like John Wick is just isn't trying to focus on that. We're not pretending to have a bunch of heart. We're not pretending to have all this character nuance. We're just an action flick, and we give him the motivation he needs to do all this cool shit. And so I agree with that. But I do. I want to. I'll start it. Like, Baby Driver is a.
Wait, hold on. I want to say one more thing. Sorry.
One more critical. Sorry. Yeah, sorry.
No, and just because we did Raising Arizona last time, and that's what motivated us to do Baby Driver, I think we just have to pause for that 2 seconds and go, if we compare this to Raising Arizona, it feels like maybe this was the movie he wanted to be the most like Raising Arizona. But in the end, when we talked about it, as cartoony as Nick Cage and Holly Hunter's characters are, they still have depth, and we still care about them, and they still grow and change and suffer. And, it's heartbreaking when, even though they're these cartoon characters, they decide they're not going to be together anymore, and that they're too irresponsible to make a good couple. And already that's got so much more depth, I think, than what we're seeing in Baby and Debbie, or any of the relationships in this movie. And so I think, for me, it was just, I wish we'd had a little bit more of that. And I think you said it perfectly, Daniel. It feels a little more like pretend. It just feels a little shallow and surfacey to make that feel that way when it's not really there. But yes, I'm sorry to have interrupted you. Please launch into all the awesome stuff.
I think it's great.
I think, I mean, like, from a technical perspective, this is like a masterclass, I think, in so much of the editing the car chases are exhilarating, right? Yeah. And I do think this does a good job of kind of supporting, again, it's got a great support. I mean, the supporting cast carries this movie probably more than Baby does, right? Like 100%. In terms of everything. But the supporting cast is really good, and they play off each other really, really well. And there's some really tight, snappy dialogue. There's all these great, quick cut, just really exhilarating sequences and scenes, whether it's the car chases or the long takes with Baby. Like, it does. There's a musical like quality to this film at times that I think is really cool. But it doesn't feel like your traditional like movie music. It doesn't feel like we're watching La La Land or West Side Story. It's like its own like kind of all the music is completely diegetic, except I guess there's a few times like an actual score comes in, just a few times. It's very rare. But it just I don't know. There's something of just a whimsical magicalness to it. You know what I mean? It doesn't feel like the real world, really. It feels like this kind of fun, car chasey bad guys versus good guys, like the Old West, but in modern times kind of world. And I do think it does a really good job of pulling off that.
One of the things I really like along those lines is the ways in which the movie becomes a little meta and kind of starts to go outside of itself. So just on the level of the music, or first of all, the musical nature of it, like the laundromat scene is a great scene where all of the dryers are filled with primary color clothing, and it makes it very, it's completely unrealistic, and it sort of pushes you out, but it's just so visually great, and reflecting this sort of uber happiness, right, of these two characters together. But then, and a lot of it is the stuff that almost all of the meta stuff has to do with the music. So in the scene where he's going to get the coffee, and he's got the wonderful choreographed thing sort of in the opening of the movie, and we see the different lyrics that he's singing sort of like written on lampposts or written on the sidewalk or different signs or whatever, and sort of comes out of itself a little bit. I think he does it twice, but especially the first time when he starts songs over to get the timing right, for the excitement of the movie. It's almost like he's aware that he's in a movie, and he wants the beats of the music to match what he's doing, and then something interrupts it and goes off, and he has to correct it. And then the last one that I noticed, I'm sure there's more, is when Tequila is playing in the shootout with the corrupt cops. And then as they're leaving, Bats throws the grenade in, and then as they're driving, he says tequila, and then it blows up, And so there is a fun self-awareness, which of course we see in Scott Pilgrim too, where it sort of, the movie escapes itself. And I almost wish there was a little bit more of that. I think it would have been more fun, even more fun, and maybe had that lighter quality that might have even stopped me thinking about the lack of depth of characters, because then I just would have been marveling at, the winks and the nods, and there's a few, but it would have been great to have more. Yeah.
No, I agree. I do want to kind of bring up one thing is, I real quick, I think it's, like Daniel said, like a masterclass in some of these different areas. I think it's even to me, just the idea of it's a slow motion scene, but like his slow motion self is still matching up with the actual like song. Like to me, that's it probably not very hard to do practically on a film set, but it's just something I think is still impressive and just really cool. And I still think maybe it's harder than I'm giving it credit for, but I love that kind of stuff. And I think it's really cool to see that kind of thing. And again, I told you earlier, the car sequences are fantastic. And I think car people would really enjoy those. But there's one thing I do want to ask, and it's something that we kind of, I think what sparked this whole thing was, the tones here. We have like two different kind of competing tones going on.
Yeah.
And you kind of mentioned this, Bruce, and I agree with you that if it was more whimsical, more fun, and more winky, the movie would probably be, almost okay, right? We can kind of get over those surface level characters because we're having fun, like kind of Scott Pilgrim. There's so many wild transitions and just, a P bar and just all these kind of crazy things happening. That's just so fun. You can kind of forgive any almost other misgivings it has, if it has any. And it's just, that's what's kind of weird about this movie is it has this like, 1 minute he's dancing, he's singing. We have music cut to his, swinging around a pole, and then, he's touching the bass and they're talking sign language. And then we have a diner sequence where it's super serious and the lighting's different and he's fixing to kill Deborah. And it is kind of interesting. And I think it kind of ultimately it works against itself in the movie.
Yeah, that was when the first time I watched it, that struck me more. And I mentioned my wife was really bothered by it. And I think for her, the violence was more disturbing for her. She can watch a certain kind of violent movie, but it was just sort of unexpected, that the movie would go there. You've got that laundromat scene with all bright colors and spinning things and slightly long takes with people dancing around and the camera even feeling like it's dancing around, and then 30 minutes later, you got rebar going through somebody's head, and you've got, Doc getting, shot and then run over again, and, stuff like that. It is hard to figure out sort of how to deal with that tone. Yeah, I will say the whimsical stuff in Scott Pilgrim, it's motivated by the video game, and the video game sense of things. I think here what the movie's really playing with, obviously, is the use of music and sound design. And so I think limiting those whimsical things to the sound design makes sense. Like, I'm okay with that. I still would have liked more, but it does leave us with a little bit of, again, I've got this freeze frame of Joe being left at the nursing home, and it's this super tear jerky melodramatic scene, and then suddenly 5 minutes later people are just getting blown away, and maybe that's just a very contemporary postmodern kind of going all over the place with a movie, but it still bothers me a little bit, not as much as the first time I saw it, but yeah.
For me, I can kind of justify it as being like an illustration of baby not fitting in the world too, because all the whimsical scenes, it's just baby or baby with Deborah or baby with Joe. That's true. Right? It's never those people. And then when we're those people, it gets hardcore. And so I do think maybe you could say, well, he wanted to show, hey, when this is what baby, who he wants to be, this is the world he wants to live in, but he can't completely because he's tied to this other world. So it didn't bother me too much.
That makes a lot of sense, but then one thing that bothers me along those lines is the first super whimsical scene is him getting coffee for the criminals after the robbery.
True. But he wasn't with them when he was dancing around and doing the trumpet.
No, he's not with them.
I'm parsing hairs. Yeah. Splitting hairs a bit.
Yeah. So, yeah, well, I mean, anyway.
Well, I was going to say, one thing to give the movie credit for is we need like a buzzer. That way we can like see a light come on so we know that the interruption. One thing to give the movie credit for is its escalation in visible violence. Like in terms of, the first thing we really see is he looks at the window and they're pulling the guns on him. He looks away. And then, the next time we see it, there's obviously almost someone getting killed by Jamie Foxx's character and the big car crashes. And then the first thing we see is a clothing hanging out the door and a brief shot of a body. So it is kind of building on this violence.
It does progress. You're right.
Yeah.
And certainly part of the thing at the beginning for why you can justify baby being more happy after the first robbery is there is no violence, right? I mean, I think in that one we see Buddy, shoot his shotgun into the ceiling. And there is some tension there. There is some fear when he pushes the manager into the office that something bad will happen. But then we don't get the sense that it did. Everything is okay, So I do think you're right, Donovan. I think there is an escalation of the violence. And clearly at some point, he becomes a part of it, right, in making the choice to kill bats. Although, again, that doesn't – you almost want it to go somewhere, I know it's still supposed to be a light movie, but he does make the choice to kill someone, and then he then has to kill Buddy at the end, right? So he ends up killing two people. He doesn't kill Doc, that's other people, but he does kill two people. And honestly, you kind of get back to how we think about violence, and then we get back to the fact that he only got 5 years in jail for all the robberies and for killing two people. I mean, I know they're bad people, but it's still murder, right? I mean, you don't get to do that. And he doesn't seem... I know the movie's still supposed to be light, but he just doesn't seem affected by any of that, He killed two people and no biggie, he's not supposed to belong in that world.
Well, but to be fair, I do think it was interesting that that's literally the line he says to Debbie when he stops her from running away is, you don't belong in this world.
Right.
And kind of almost...
And now he does. Yeah. And that's a clever
But then
line.
you get this totally, again, whimsical moment of being in jail. It's everything's so clean. And it just looks so kind of chill, you know what I mean? Yeah. It's just jail doesn't look that bad. I mean, you know what I mean? And then he gets out, and the girl's waiting on him with the perfect car of his dreams. It does feel a bit. Yeah, we don't take it as seriously at that point.
Well,
which is also just like the ending of Ocean's 11, by the way.
Oh yeah. Well, to be fair, in defense of Baby, he's. I would love to do a heist movie someday. Actually, I got a heist movie I'd like to do next. We'll talk about this after, Bruce. Okay. But actually, no, it's not. It's the next movie. Never mind. But anyway, Daniel knows my thought process on that. But there is something interesting here about Baby is kind of killing these people out of self-defense. I mean, like, he could obviously run away, but he's not like killing them to be a murderer. He's doing it because it's either he dies or they die, you know? So
I agree.
Bats is the kind of
character.
Sure.
Well, I do feel like Bat is just set up as like, if Baby, if Baby had
Bats
run,
would
he
come
was coming
after
him.
Yes,
Yeah.
100%.
But obviously, yes, directly the second one for sure.
Yeah. I do want to mention, I know we're kind of getting close to wrapping it up here, and we've talked a lot about the editing of, just how virtuosic the editing is, and in conjunction with the sound. I will mention two things I liked and one thing that I had mixed feelings about. Baby does have the tinnitus, which causes the high pitched whistle or whatever you want to call it. And there is a point, I can't remember when in the movie, where everything gets quiet and we hear that sound, right? But there are actually is it when he's with the car and Debbie and she's playing his mom's cassette and he has to put his hand on the speaker? Is that what you're talking about? That's after he. Or is it the gunshots? That's after he gets the two gunshots, and maybe that's when we hear the tinnitus. I can't quite remember. But you actually, if you pay really close attention to the sound design, the tinnitus hum actually is embedded in some of the other score, either in songs or other places. And there's usually other sounds going with it, but you can kind of pick that out. And I think it's generally in moments of stress. I kind of need to go back and see again if that's the case. I thought that was really cool. I also really loved, and I don't know, I'm guessing this was part of the script and Edgar Wright's direction, but the way Kevin Spacey delivers his lines, there are times when it rhymes, and there's a very... I didn't have enough time to break it down and see whether he's talking in iambic pentameter, but I mean, there's this very flowing, sing-songy way, and there are times where he rhymes his lines, and especially when he's, and when he's talking about the heist and he's going through all the stuff with the bank, and if there's another rhyme, I forget what it was, but I just really appreciated doing that with dialogue where you pick up on it, but it doesn't feel like you're listening to Shakespeare, or, it's not overly done. It's just there enough that you can have fun with it. The one thing that I wasn't sure how I felt about it, and I'd like to hear you guys, when did this movie come out? Was 2017. It 2015? 2017?
Yeah, 2017, yeah.
Is the cutting of the gunfire to the beats of the music. And that in particular now, you watch trailers for John Wick type movies, they all have that. And maybe they all sort of grew out of Baby Driver doing it. Maybe they were already doing it before Baby Driver. I wondered if that was just a little too much, or whether that still was sort of a clever use of playing with all the sound design. I was curious how you guys felt about it, especially in the tequila scene with all the gunfire. But there's other times too where they're exchanging gunfire with the cops, or when Bats and the guy in the pickup are chasing after them, that they do it sort of to the music as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always, specifically with this and the tequila scene, I'm always impressed, actually. When I see it happen, I'm like, man, and part of me is I always try to break it down in my head as I'm watching it. How would I go about making sure I hit certain beats or whatever? And I guess maybe more of it, obviously it seems very planned out, the way Edgar Wright doing things according to Daniel. And it even shows obviously in the filmmaking, but I definitely, I always put myself in those shoes and go, how would I do that? And I'm always impressed by it. So it doesn't bother me.
Yeah, to me that flows into kind of what we were talking about earlier with these sort of meta, meta, the movie becoming meta about itself, and to me that feels just along the lines as the other stuff we were talking about.
Because they're not firing, they can't literally be firing, because it's boom, 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 right, or whatever the rhythm is, and of course they wouldn't be firing that way. So you're right, it does play into the meta qualities for sure.
Yeah, that's another part where this is quasi musical. If you're gonna have a gunfight in a musical, You might do it like this.
You might do it that way. Yeah, no, that makes sense.
So,
I buy you guys' defense of that. I'm on board with that.
Good.
Yeah, I mean, I think overall we seem pretty much in agreement for the most part here. Our enjoyment levels of it, its pitfalls, but also all the great things that it does add in here. And I think, Daniel, is your favorite Edgar Wright film also Scott Pilgrim, or do you have one that might be different than me and Bruce?
I really like Scott Pilgrim. I also really like Hot Fuzz. I'm blanking on the it's not Shaun of the Dead. Is it Shaun of the Dead?
Yeah, Shaun of the Dead.
Yeah, I really like Shaun of the Dead a lot. I honestly, it's been so long since I've seen those. I want to do a rewatch. I think Scott Pilgrim's definitely top 2, maybe top 3, depending. But I do like a lot of his movie. I like his kind of his style and what he does with his films. To me, the last time I watched Scott Pilgrim, I got a little bit bored a couple times, and I was like, why am I getting bored? This is weird. But who knows? Maybe it was just I was in a bad mood that day.
You've just reached saturation point.
Yeah, maybe so. Yeah.
And I will say I am super excited for Last Night in Soho.
Me too.
Yeah.
I love Anya Taylor-Joy, and it's funny that I mentioned Drive and sort of this more nighttime neon world, because that's sort of what the trailers are suggesting for Last Night in Soho. Not necessarily the 80s, but just kind of that cool nighttime vibe. So I'm super excited for that.
Yeah, I'm very curious about it just because it's such a different genre, or it seems like a thriller horror, and I'm really curious to see how he puts his Edgar Wright spin on it. Because the trailers are hard because you're not getting like a full sequence with his like style. So
yeah,
I'm
probably
curious.
my favorite Edgar Wright movie is Ant-Man. I'm kidding.
That hurts.
Yeah.
There is a test footage that he shot that made it through, and you can actually watch it. It's pretty cool. It's like
was
2-3
none of his
minutes
actual
long.
footage in the final film? For some reason, I thought they may have repurposed some of it.
He didn't shoot
never even
anything.
shot. Oh, okay.
No,
Okay.
Yeah,
just
he
did
was
that
never.
in
Yeah.
Peyton Reed took
Never
over,
went into
but
production. Yeah.
yeah, that would have been a really cool Marvel movie too. Like that's pretty wild. But I bet that money they would want him back now. Last thing I'll say is, before we find out how you can write into us, is that there will be a sequel to Baby Driver, and that he wrote it about a year after the movie came out, or he finished writing the first draft in January 2019, and in January 2021, Wright confirmed that he had finished writing the sequel script. So there will be a Baby Driver, and they said that it's going to have a new ensemble of characters. So I'm really curious to see where they go with it next.
Whoa, like completely new cast.
Besides Baby, yes.
Oh, besides.
Well,
Baby.
I mean, everyone's dead, so yeah.
Well, Baby and
what about Debbie?
Yeah,
Deborah.
and Debbie,
yeah. I'm sure she'll be in it too. Yeah.
I will say, by the way, sorry, Dom, you would be particularly interested if you look up Edgar Wright on IMDb. The only project listed for him as director after Last Night in Soho is The Running Man.
Oh shit! Really? That's wild. But what's interesting though is that the Arnold Running Man, it's based off a Stephen King book, right? And
right. Yeah.
I'm not sure how accurate the Arnold version is to the book.
I don't know, but I love Arnold version of Running. That was definitely one of my late night high school watch it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was a hero. Now he's a zero, or whatever he says. his lines that are incredible.
Yes.
No, that's a fun movie actually. Oh, it's got one of the best one-liners ever in it. I kind of stole it for a rerun actually, which is we'll see you in a. He don't say we'll see you in a rerun, but basically something along those lines, like when he pulls the lever at the end, and that's a great movie. Yeah,
it is a great movie. Yeah.
Now I got to watch that tonight.
Yeah.
Daniel, how can our listeners write into us?
Listeners, you can write into us at bit.ly/2for1mail. And Chris Pistol, I expect you to be here because I'm pretty sure he loves this movie. So write into us, bit.ly/2for1mail. Let us know why we're wrong about Baby Driver, or why we're not right enough about Baby Driver, if you know what I mean. So yeah, let us know. Did you like
Edgar
the film?
Wright enough?
Yeah, exactly.
I like it.
Zing. Yeah.
Got him.
Okay, I'm done with this now. bit.ly/2for1mail.
I'm never coming back, am I?
Well, just wait,
This
Bruce.
is
We
also
got
my
something in store.
reservation.
Remember, everybody, we're on the road to episode 100. Daniel and I and Bruce have been doing this for almost 2 years now, this November, and we've almost hit 100 episodes of the podcast. And if you haven't, to show your support, of course, hit that subscribe button. If you're on YouTube, youtube.com/2for1studios. And of course, you can check out all of our content on 2for1studios.com. All right, guys. Well, I'm really glad we did this movie. I wasn't bummed out that we did it, but after I suggested, I was like, man, we probably could have done something way more interesting or something. But now that we've talked about it, and especially in contrast to Raising Arizona and just other Edgar Wright films, I'm really glad we talked about it. So it ended up being more interesting than I thought it was going to be, actually. So yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Bruce, thank you again for being on. It's always a pleasure. And we look forward to you being on in the upcoming episodes, which we hope you come back.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it, and seems like we're starting to get back into a rhythm again. So definitely love to be doing this on the regular. So
awesome. Cool. Well, as always, my name is Donovan Thompson.
I am Daniel Wingfield.
And I'm Dr. Bruce Hutchinson.
Yeah, we don't. Yeah, sorry, good.
No, say it.
I never.
I was gonna say we just started saying I'm
master.
Master Daniel Wingfield, and I'm.
You are.
Master
You
Donovan
guys are both
Thompson. We do.
masters. Yeah,
I guess so.
Of fine arts.
At least
We're
when I'm
masters of fine
around.
arts.
Yeah. You need a fedora and a whip, Bruce.
There we go.
So on the channel at all times.
Ooh.
But anyway, guys, as
Christy
always,
might like that too much.
Well, since you brought it up, I just have to say that my junior prom was Stars of the Silver Screen, and I went as Indiana Jones. So
that's
Perfect.
awesome. That's awesome.
What we need a picture.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. Once we wrap up, I might be able to find one real quick.
Please do.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Anyway, we have spoken.